So I'm going to keep the presentation relatively brief, kind of touch on the topics and tell you about some research we've done and some other research out there. But then we'll leave plenty of time for questions, both the ones that have been submitted and any others that you might have. Maybe I'll just start off with a funny story. The other day, one of my patients showed up. He's a middle-aged 45-year-old guy, kind of a anxious sort, and he says to me, "Dr. O'Keefe, how much longer do I have to live?" So I said, "Well, tell me, do you eat a lot of red meat like filet mignon?" No, I never touch this stuff. I'm a total vegan. So, okay. Do you eat any chocolate? He says, nope, don't eat anything that's sweet at all, including chocolate, anything sweet. Do you drink alcohol? Never touch the stuff. I don't, I've never drank anything. I said, well, do you travel to exotic destinations? He said, nope, I never leave home. I mean, it's too risky. I don't take any risks. Did you ever have any sex? And he says, no, I'm not married, and like I said, I don't take risks. So, yeah. I said, well, John, I'm not sure why you even care how much longer you're going to live. No, just a joke. Didn't really say that to him. But anyway, the point is, a lot of the things that we in preventive medicine are discovering that are good for us also are things that make our life meaningful and more enjoyable. And we're going to talk about two of those today, which can be healthy in the right contexts when used the right way: sex and alcohol. So the first, let's see, the next slide here. We're going to start off with alcohol. I love this quote from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "It's long been recognized that the problems with alcohol relate not to the use of a bad thing, but to the abuse of a good thing." I like to think of alcohol as a sharp, in fact, a razor-sharp, double-edged sword. I don't know of anything in health that cuts so deeply one way or the other, depending on how it's used. Alcohol is the #3 leading cause of premature death in the United States. In fact, for males age 15 to 59, that's an age group that's sort of near and dear to me, with myself and my two sons in that age category now. Alcohol abuse is the #1 cause of death, premature death. So on the other hand, as we'll see in a few minutes, if you use alcohol the right way, in fact, it can be a very positive thing, especially for heart health, but the key is the dose. There's an old saying that says it's the dose that makes the poison, or in fact the remedy. And we published a recent article on that topic, kind of going through these issues. This next slide, talks about the fact that excessive alcohol, even an occasional binge drinking, like you say, well, 7 to 10 drinks a week can be healthy, and then one of my patients asked, well, can I save them up and drink all 10 on Saturday night? No, not really. That is not healthy drinking. In fact, even in people otherwise drinking responsibly, an occasional binge substantially increases the risk for things like atrial fibrillation, the most common rhythm abnormality we see. Actually, there's an epidemic of AFib going on in America right now that'll be increasing all the time, but also increases risk for stroke, for even heart attacks. So binge drinking is not a good idea. We call binge drinking more than 5 drinks over the span of 2 or 3 hours. We tend to really focus on if you can't drink responsibly, don't drink at all. So we talk about alcohol as being sort of the classic J-shaped curve, where a little bit of alcohol, that is like say 1 drink a day for females up to 2 drinks a day for males, can reduce risk for all-cause mortality by about 18 or 20%. Also reduces risk of coronary heart disease about 30%, which is about as good as the best statin we have, like atorvastatin, Lipitor-like medication. It reduces risk of diabetes if you drink just 1 a day. Reduces high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, stroke, dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So it can be a very good thing. I a recent meta-analysis here of over 1 million people shown in this slide. You see the J-shaped curve, the dotted curve and the solid curve. The lighter gray curves are just the confidence intervals. But so that J-shaped curve on the top is females, and the bottom solid one is males. And you can see that compared to teetotalers on the left, who drink no drinks per day, about half to 1 drink a day will reduce risk of all-cause mortality for females and males. But if you drink more than about 2.5 drinks for a female, your risk of dying is no better than a teetotaler. And if you drink about 3 or 4 drinks a day for males, it becomes no better. And the J part of the curve, the upper part of the curve, is that as the drink consumption increases, it's just a disaster, which is why it's such a common cause of premature death. It's causes car crashes and cirrhosis and cancers and strokes, and not to mention all the domestic and psychological and social strife it causes. So alcohol is a slippery slope, and a lot of people can't really sort of manage that. And I don't have to look too far from my own family to sort of see the double-edged nature of alcohol. So, like when I look back over the generations in my family, who I've known them, I've been around for enough time to notice this pattern in my family. My grandfathers and great-grandfathers, a lot of them died, and uncles died in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and their wives, bless their hearts, were widows for decades. And they didn't remarry, but they were, of course, enjoying life, despite not having their husbands. But the point is that they had kind of the same genes, when you look through my family history, a mixture. But the males, when they were stressed, or even when they weren't stressed, lots of times drank too much, and they died of things like, alcohol-related diseases and trauma and all sorts of crazy stuff that were preventable, largely reversible. And the females, like my grandmother Dorothy, who I went to medical school with, was a typical example. She would have her 1 shot of whiskey every night at happy hour, and whoever was around, neighbors or family, but she would thoroughly enjoy happy hour for an hour or two, never having more than 2 drinks. They never started more than 2 drinks. Usually 1 or 1.5, and we would call it, she'd mix Manhattans, but we'd call it Manhootens, because after 1 she'd be hooting and laughing and telling stories, and so I mean she knew how to drink responsibly and really enjoy it, and she lived to be 102.5, by the way. My great-grandmother, she lived to be about 95 and died in her sleep without any pre-existing, conditions or debility. But she would have a glass of red wine every night with her evening meal, right before her evening meal. So it's really important to keep the dose right. People often ask, what does it matter what kind of alcohol you drink? Well, most importantly, the dose is the most important. If you want to have 1 beer or a beer or 2 or 1 glass of wine or 2 or even hard liquor, as long as you keep the dose right, like Granny O'Keefe did, it can be beneficial. The most beneficial component in a drink is the ethanol. In small doses, it actually reduces the post-meal spike in glucose, and a lot of the inflammation in all of our systems comes from these spikes in sugar that happen when you eat a big meal. If you have 1 alcoholic drink before or with a large meal, it will blunt that post-meal glucose spike by 30 or 40%, which reduces inflammation. And when you reduce inflammation through your system, you reduce all sorts of things, especially heart disease, dementia, diabetes, and those kind of chronic, debilitating diseases that are so prevalent and pernicious in our current climate. So the take-home message is alcohol can be a positive thing, but to be honest with you, I've learned to not recommend people who don't drink take up drinking, because lots of times there's reasons that people avoid alcohol. Not to mention, it might be religious reasons, but you can be perfectly healthy, and in fact, non-drinkers tend to be healthy, and so there's no reason to take up alcohol. On the other hand, if you can drink responsibly, that is, not more than 10 drinks a week for women, not more than 14 for a week for men, and not more than 2 a day at any one setting, then you can, you can feel reassured that this is a habit that that is good for your health and also enjoyable. So, it's one of those things that the best, because of what I've just told you, you might surmise that, in fact, just like the females in the generations of my family dating back 150 years who figured out have one alcoholic drink before or with the evening meal is ideal, because you blunt that glucose spike every day. But it's a slippery slope, and a lot of people just can't handle just drinking 1 or 2. So one of my favorite sayings is, a lot of things in life we rely on willpower to do the right thing, exercise or not drinking too much or eating right. And the problem with willpower from a scientific standpoint is that it's got a half-life of about 2 weeks, so it wears off pretty quickly, and it's soluble in alcohol. So you start off drinking 1, thinking, I'll only drink 1, and then, if you're not in the habit of cutting yourself off, you can really be in trouble with excess alcohol in no time. Red wine is the best type of alcohol because it has these bioflavonoid polyphenols in them, which tends to magnify the benefits of modest alcohol intake. So if you can develop a taste for red wine, I'll have to admit it's one of my favorite parts of the day too. I have 1, occasionally 2 glasses of red wine, not more than 10 a week, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So trying to be more like my grandmother's that way than my hard-drinking male ancestors. So not that all of them were. My father drank very responsibly, but in any event, okay. Well, let's move on here to sex and your heart. So this is a fun and interesting topic too, and also one of those things that, in fact, well, maybe I'll start off telling you another story. So we've published a lot in the last 2 or 3 years on the benefits of exercise and the fact that, like alcohol, it's dose dependent. And lo and behold, it's the same kind of a J-shaped curve, except when it comes with exercise, it's a reverse J-shaped curve, so that people who exercise a moderate amount get tremendous benefits. And if you exercise a whole lot, you're not worse than somebody who doesn't exercise at all, but in fact you lose some of the benefits. So you waste some of the benefits of moderate exercise by overdoing it. So I get a lot of world-class athletes literally come to me from all over the country, some of them former world record holders and stuff, and they're having problems with their heart's irritable now or this or that. They got a lot of plaque in their arteries, and a lot of these, in fact, are due to just too many hard miles on their engine, if you will, on their heart. And lots of times I'll tell them, instead of running for 2 hours, why don't you circle back home after 20 or 30 minutes of jogging and use that extra time to get romantic with your significant other? Because honestly, as great as exercise is for your heart, without question, the best type of exercise for your heart is regular sexual activity with a steady, significant other. So why would that be? Well, if nothing else, sex is exercise. But let's be honest. You'd have to exercise vigorously for 3 hours to burn off the number of calories you get from eating a single Snickers bar. So that's a bit of a stretch. 3 hours of vigorous sexual activity for 1 Snickers bar, so in fact, burning calories is not the main benefits of exercise. I mean, of course, it boosts mood. It also reduces stress. It's actually good studies showing that regular sexual activity reduces things like chronic pain. It reduces depression. There are strong studies suggesting that people who have regular sex, again, with a significant other, in a stable monogamous relationship is ideal. That not only it really changes the hormone levels, okay, and besides increasing dopamine, which is kind of the pleasure hormone, it gives you the spike in dopamine, and it also raises oxytocin levels, especially the hugging and the kissing and the snuggling and all that stuff, raises oxytocin levels and lowers stress hormones like cortisol. So that it's really great, besides it's good for your health, it's really great for your relationships. So taking time to like just be, have a steady sort of like sexual, sort of regular schedule of sexual activity with your significant other is a really great habit to get into. And of course, lots of times at the beginnings of relationships, when you're sort of young and sort of, infatuated and all that stuff, it's easier. And like most people kind of fall into a category where they don't, prioritize the sex. It's like, well, they got housework, they got work, they got kids, they got a million priorities, and sex is not a priority. But from the simple health benefits, both the psychological benefits and the physical benefits and the longevity benefits, not to mention the quality of life benefits, it's like among the most important things you can do. It really is. And there's recent studies showing that like sexual activities 3 times a week look substantially younger in a double-blind controlled study than people who weren't having regular sexual activity. We talk about middle-aged people. And a lot of people say, well, I'm too old for sex. You're never too old for sex. Sex, is light exercise. So it's good to be doing other exercise. So this is not the only stress you're putting on your heart, because it's a little bit of stress. It's not like a lot, and you don't need to worry about whether your heart can handle stress. If you can go for a stroll, you can, your heart's good enough for sex. But the other really important thing, not only from the psychological benefits and the health benefits, but for bonding, there's nothing better for like improving the quality of your relationship. Is like, because those hormones like that oxytocin, the dopamine, it's not for nothing that nature does that. It's like when you're having regular sexual activity with a steady partner, it just cements you to them. It makes you stay in love with them, and that's really for health and well-being and even financial security. It helps to be able to be with a steady partner. So, and I don't mean to be lecturing, because it's like a lot of this stuff is things that we naturally don't tend to. I know personally that like if I don't prioritize it, it tends to not happen. And so I'm just telling you what not only the science shows, but what my own experience with a lot of my patients, because I always ask my patients about this, and I really encourage them, that make it a priority. So the sexual activity can cause sudden death, rarely, but it's like more likely to happen. So weekend warriors. So again, just staying regular active is important. Sex, like the swimsuit season, can be a great motivator to stay fit, and there's a popular book called Look Great Naked, that kind of thing. As we mentioned before, provides a boost to your self-esteem and mood that's sort of different than anything else can do, and it does change those hormones around. Like men, lots of times in middle age, their hormones, like their testosterone, starts flagging, and it turns out that a low testosterone level is a marker for cardiovascular death and heart attack. And paradoxically, giving people testosterone might increase risk of heart attack. So the logical solution is do things that naturally increase testosterone, like having a regular sexual sort of schedule, and also burning off belly fat, because that testosterone lowers testosterone. I mean, the belly fat lowers testosterone, and then doing some weightlifting, because heavy weightlifting can also increase testosterone. And testosterone is actually good for females too. It provides the libido, largely responsible for libido, the sex drive for both men and women. So those things are good for women too. So an active sex life we talked about not only helps us stay married, but stay in love. And among the most important predictors of someone who will stay young and have a long life is a stable relationship with a significant other. So it's really important. We're very social creatures, and sex is a really great social glue for for improving our bonding in the long term. So I think I'm going to open it up there, finish up, and just summarize that sex and exercise, I'm sorry, sex and alcohol and exercise for that matter, can be, well, sex is a very important thing that, I think that everyone should try to have a stable sex life, a regular sex life. The alcohol thing, if you can be responsible about drinking, it's perfectly okay and probably a healthy thing. But again, it's a double-edged sword, and if you can't avoid alcohol by all means. And lots of times, there's a lot of things for a lot of us where abstinence is easier than moderation. And so if you're one of those people who can't be moderate about your drinking, by all means, don't drink at all. Mark Twain had a funny quote. He said, "All things in moderation, including moderation." And I think he was trying to rationalize his occasional alcohol binge. But from a doctor's standpoint, that's not a good idea, Mark, to be even have the occasional binge. Okay, so Aaron, do you think we just start off with these questions that we have already submitted? And then if you have any other questions, just to go ahead and send them in over the line. And we'll start off with this one fellow says, "When I drink, I don't get an erection." Well, that can be a problem. Again, one alcoholic drink is not likely to cause a problem, but more than that, you might have problems with erectile function. So one more reason to drink moderately. Along those same lines, people asking about our Viagra and Cialis, those kinds of medications. Are they safe for the heart? Yeah, in fact, I recommend them all the time. I think Cialis is better than Viagra just because the effect at augmenting erections, improving the quality of erections, really lasts for like 2 to 3 days. A lot of my patients refer to it as the weekender erectile function drug because the Viagra will last for 6 hours or so. Not that you're going to get an erection for 6 hours, but the improved ability to get an erection. So for both of these drugs, it's shorter benefit of action for the Viagra than for the Cialis. But again, if you are having, unstable heart troubles, see your doctor first. In fact, you're going to have to see your doctor anyway, I think, to get a prescription for this. And regular exercise, of course, will sort of immunize you against problems with sexual activity with or without the erectile dysfunction drugs. So let's see. Why does my heart race so bad after sitting or lying down for periods of time, either after sex or even just when you lay down in bed at night? That's not an uncommon sort of observation. It's a time when your heart is shifting gears. It's lots of times more likely to be irregular. So when you're kind of up and your catecholamines, your adrenaline levels are up, and into the evening, you sort of those stress hormones stay up a little bit as you're trying to, might be trying to do work or stay awake or whatever. And then when you lay down, suddenly you get a drop in those adrenaline levels, and your nervous system settles down, and your vagal, the sort of the rest and relaxation and digestion part of your automatic nervous system kick in. And shifting gears like that can lots of times make your heart sort of irritable, and you can feel some skipped heartbeats. Sometimes that's when people have atrial fibrillation or tachycardias. But in any event, slow, deep breathing is a good remedy for that. This is a great way to go to sleep, by the way, or if you're anxious about this, or you're feeling palpitations, or you feel like your blood pressure is up, this is a really great way to settle down your nervous system. It's called relaxation breathing, and I just call it the 3-5-7 method. So you breathe in deeply for the count of 3, preferably through your nose, and then you hold it for the count of 5. Just sort of don't count fast or too slow. Just about the pace of your heartbeat, and then breathe out for the count of 7. So 3 in, 5 hold, out 7. And you do that 4 cycles, or maybe 8 cycles. And if you're trying to go to sleep, boom, it will put you to sleep. Or if you're trying to relax, it'll slow your heart rate down. It'll settle down, skip heartbeats. It's perfectly safe. And what it does is it's just augmenting the vagal tone, which settles down your heart and lowers your blood pressure. If you do this a couple times a day, it's as good as the high blood pressure medication. It's very effective. Practice that. All right, so let's see. There are some questions about how important is C-reactive protein score. That's an inflammation score. It's important, but to be honest with you, all the things that lower C-reactive protein are things you ought to be doing anyway, like regular exercise, getting your weight down, especially when people ask me, what should my weight be? I usually say, well, number one, you're the better judge of that than I am, and number two, more important than your weight is your waist circumference, which, by the way, a lot of the cultures down through the history, everywhere you go, the ideal the ideal physical attractive feature is having a narrow waist, both in men and women. And again, that's another hardwired preference that humans have, and the reason why is that belly fat tends to distort your hormones, including your sex hormones. So if you're looking for somebody to mix your genes with that is likely to be able to be fertile, having a narrow waist, especially with muscles elsewhere, but a narrow waist is really a good, pretty reliable marker for sex hormones and stress hormones that are in the right range. So that you can, if you burn off belly fat, you can lower the C-reactive protein, the inflammation, like the post-meal glucose. That post-meal glucose, the spike in glucose, goes as fat into the liver and into the belly. So that's why you should avoid sugar, avoid wheat and processed grains. Get to bed, get your sleep, because that cortisol, the high stress levels from cortisol tends to promote belly fat. And so your ideal waist circumference should be less than half your height in inches. Okay? One more time. Half your height in inches. So like I'm 6 feet tall, my waist should be under 36 or under. Joan's 5'4", and so her waist needs to be under 32. That is a pretty stringent guideline. Probably 80% of Americans don't meet it. Middle-aged or older Americans, people over age, say 30 or 35, most Americans don't meet that, and that's a really important thing. Rather than your weight, shoot to lower your waist. Okay, how are we doing for time here? I guess we're doing pretty good on time. We'll look at some more of these. Are statins the only way to lower LDL cholesterol if there's a family history of cardiovascular disease and coronary disease? That's a great question. I get it all the time, and there's been a lot of press lately about cholesterol not being important, and we've been misled, and there's just a lot of confusion. So statins, one of the biggest urban myths in America is the toxicity of statins. Statins are wonder drugs. There's never in the history of medicine, in the history of science, there has never been a drug that has been so widely studied with placebo-controlled, randomized, controlled trials lasting years with hundreds of thousands of people who get either the real thing, like Lipitor, or a pill that looks just like Lipitor. Nobody knows what they're getting. The doctor who's doing the study doesn't know. Nobody knows until 5 years and they unblind it and look at it, and lo and behold, if they've had coronary disease or a heart attack or bypass or real high cholesterol, a lot of risk factors, there's a lot lower rates of heart attack, stroke, cardiac death in the people who get the statins. So, but most people are very hesitant to take a statin because they hear these, these urban myths about causing liver toxicity and muscle aches, and it is surprisingly common to me how often people who are taking statins really complain of muscle aches and joint pains and sore tendons and sore backs and Achilles tendonitis and plantar fasciitis and low back pain and all sorts of trouble, sometimes brain fog or all kinds of things. Well, it turns out that statins, besides lowering cholesterol, lower something called coenzyme Q10, which is our body's, one of our rate-limiting chemicals that generates energy. You've got to have high CoQ10 levels if you're going to be youthful, energetic, and healthy. And so a lot of people, especially after age 45 on a high-dose statin, get low CoQ10 levels, and that is a problem. That probably is what causes most of the side effects. The Cardiotabs company that I'm the chief medical officer for has a coenzyme Q10 that, in my opinion, is the best on the market. We spent 2 years working with the smartest PhDs in the country on coenzyme Q10 to come up with a uniquely bioavailable CoQ10. So people on a statin who take coenzyme Q10, particularly the Cardiotabs Ultra CoQ10, keep the levels up, don't get those side effects, those muscle aches. So statins are important, especially if you have high risk. Now, that being said, one of my favorite tests for women over age about 45, men over 40, I think like a colonoscopy, most everybody in middle age ought to have at least one of these. It's a cardio scan. It's a simple calcium score, a $50 test. You lay down, hold your breath for 20 seconds, no IV, no stress, immediate results, and we're looking for calcified plaque. If you're 50 or 60 or 45 or 70 and you have a 0 calcium score, and you ought not have any calcium in your arteries, by the way. Your arteries should be soft and supple and smooth like they were when you were a teenager and a baby. And some people get hardening of the arteries, and this stuff, this plaque that builds up in your arteries, does so for years or decades before it blows up and causes a heart attack or a stroke or a ruptured aneurysm. And so but if you wait till it shows up clinically, usually it's a disaster. So you need to know. And if you don't have any calcium in your arteries, most of the time I say, you don't need a statin. I don't care what your cholesterol is. Your body seems to be handling it well. So we'll just work on diet and exercise and maybe over-the-counter supplements like red yeast rice. Cardiotabs makes the best red yeast rice, in my opinion, as well. It's the only one manufactured in the United States rather than China, and it's much more reliable. Or things like cardiosterol, which will lower cholesterol in a non-pharmacologic way. And certainly diet and exercise can be helpful for improving cholesterol. But to be honest with you, the best diet for lowering cholesterol, like a vegan diet, is not ideal for overall health because it's too low in fat, and you need some animal protein for building muscle and keeping those hormone levels high and keeping your bones strong. So that's important to eat. So, and there are several studies here about vegetarian diet and heart health, and I'll just say this, that I often have arguments with my vegetarian friends, and I always start off by saying, listen, I would be willing to bet you anything that I eat a heck of a lot more vegetables than you do. We eat tons of vegetables around our household, and you know, kale and spinach and broccoli and all those cruciferous vegetables are about the best, but we're eating cucumbers and carrots and all those vegetables except, you know, potatoes. And to be honest with you, we eat some potatoes too around our house, except we usually bake them and scoop out all the, you know, the white part and the inner part of the potato and throw it in the trash. It drives my mother crazy because she loves potatoes. She thinks it's such a waste. But the nutrition in the skin of the potato is very healthy. And then we, you know, brush them with olive oil and put a little white cheese on it and finish baking them. It's just delicious. It's a great way to eat potatoes and get all the benefits without all the glucose spike from all that, you know, the inner part, the white part of the potato. So anyway, lots of vegetables are very important, but some animal protein in that regard. The cardio whey is a whey protein that has a lot of branched chain amino acids. It's kind of like a way to get, you know, powdered sort of animal protein without any saturated fat. So you can mix that with like milk, or dairy bothers me, so I mix it with almond milk, unsweetened almond milk. I put a scoop or two of chocolate whey is my favorite, the chocolate cardio whey. And lots of times for breakfast, like this morning, I have that along with some leftover salad and an avocado with some lemon juice on it and some berries with raw nuts. Just delicious meal and full of nutrients and no sort of nothing in there to spike the glucose. So, okay, other questions. We talked about cholesterol some. Here's a question about niacin for cardiac patients, and another about omega-3. So niacin is a vitamin that at very high doses can raise the good cholesterol. But there have been 2 or 3 big randomized, one of those gold standard studies that showed statins are so beneficial. Those same kind of studies with niacin have completely pulled the rug out from niacin. Honestly, I don't recommend niacin anymore. And my patients on niacin, I take them off of it. And I put them on a statin, and instead of the niacin, they can take some of these other over-the-counter supplements we talked about, not red yeast rice, but because red yeast rice acts kind of the same way a statin does, but in a much lower dose and more gentle way, lowering cholesterol. But omega-3 works great in combination with a statin and is a good substitute for niacin. But niacin studies show that it raises the HDL, lowers the bad cholesterol, raises the good cholesterol, and lowers triglycerides. So it improves the numbers, but it doesn't improve the things that really matter. We're not treating you with these strategies to make your numbers shine. The numbers are just surrogates. We're trying to make you live longer, have less heart attacks, dementia, strokes, cardiac death. We want you to have a long, healthy life with soft, smooth coronary arteries and a strong, healthy heart. Who cares about the numbers? I mean, sometimes they're important, but with niacin, it turns out it helps the numbers, but people had more cardiac deaths. They had more diabetes. They had more bleeding, more infections. Niacin at high dose is not good. And it's taken us a long time to figure it out, but these are two giant gold standard studies that just don't lie. I mean, there's no reason to be taking niacin. On the other hand, omega-3, there's been some confusion about that. So omega-3, like a lot of things in nutrition, the most important people to be taking omega-3 are people who don't like fish. If you're eating a pound of salmon a week, it's probably not a big deal if you don't take your omega-3. Omega-3 is really important for your brain and your heart and making those arteries soft and supple and keeping triglycerides low and reducing inflammation. But if you're getting it from the diet, you don't need it. But about 75% of Americans don't get enough omega-3 from their diet. Then it's good to take a nice purified one like the omega-3, the Cardiotabs omega-3, either the standard, the enteric-coated, or the extra strength, are really highly purified, rich in DHA, though it kind of gets into the eyes and the brain and helps to keep your organs youthful and healthy, and also improving the triglyceride and HDL levels. So yeah, I think that a lot of people would benefit from omega-3, but niacin, skip the niacin. So let's see, we're just about at the end of our time here. One or two more questions here. Okay, oh, here's one on vitamin D. How important is vitamin D in various disease processes? How much is vitamin D of D3 is recommended? And so, and they also asked, do statins cause memory loss? Some people get some brain fog, but honestly, those big randomized studies show that statins reduce risk of dementia because they reduce the strokes that cause dementia. That being said, some people, a substantial minority of people, feel like their memory isn't as sharp, or they get a little brain fog on a statin, and that can be avoided with a good CoQ10 and keeping your vitamin D levels up. So vitamin D, it turns out, is really more of a hormone. Remember we talked about with sex and diet and how important hormones are. You can't be healthy unless your hormones are in the ideal range. And so one way to keep one of those important hormones, vitamin D3, in your system is important not only for bone strength and muscle strength, but it's important for preventing neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or depression or multiple sclerosis. Lots of studies showing that low vitamin D levels markedly predispose to those conditions. So where do we get our vitamin D3 from? The sun. Most of us, like Aaron and I, and you too probably, are sitting inside under fluorescent lights right now rather than being out there enjoying the summer sun. And so our vitamin D levels, like our omega-3 levels, like our coenzyme Q10 levels, like our calcium levels, tend to be too low. And that's where it's important to supplement. Again, about 70% of Americans have vitamin D levels that aren't high enough. You can get out, get a little safe sun, 15 or 20 minutes in the midday sun. As a general rule of thumb, if you look up in the sky and the sun is more than halfway from the horizon to directly overhead, so above more than 45 degrees up from the horizon, you can get some vitamin D from it. If it's below that, whether it's because it's the morning or you're in northern Canada or it's December or whatever, you're not going to make vitamin D3 from it. So most people need about 2,000 units of vitamin D3. That's the best kind, is D3. So you can get that from taking one Cardiotabs multivitamin. Our extra strength omega-3 also has 300 units per capsule. And so 2 capsules is the standard dose. So you get 2,600 by taking the multivitamin, and the vitamin D and the omega-3, the extra strength omega-3. And it's a good idea to have your doctor measure your vitamin D level. Very important. It's a level you need to know, okay? Kind of like the calcium score. You need to know what your calcium score is. Because even if you have a pretty normal cholesterol, if you have calcium in your arteries, you need to take a statin and then D3. It's like, so the vitamin D is very important. You also can get vitamin D from the Bone Essentials product of Cardiotabs, which is another really cool, new, very unique product that is made from a bone meal. And it's the best way to build bone without a prescription, and it's much better than standard calcium, which tends to harden your arteries, not your bones. This stuff hardens bones and is safe for the arteries. And that also has about 400 units about 700 units per serving. So, okay, well, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll turn it back over to Aaron.
Thank you, everyone, for attending and taking time out of your day. Thanks for the questions. This was a very exciting and fun webinar. A recording will be made available. You'll most likely receive it tomorrow in an email. Feel free to share it with friends, and you can shoot us a message at Cardiotabs, info@cardiotabs.com, or my email, just if you respond to the webinar email for suggestions on future webinar topics. Dr. Keefe or other health experts are always looking forward to new topics to discuss that you'd be interested in. Again, thank you for attending.
And maybe I could add one last thing, Aaron. You know, people often ask me about the dose of things like sex or alcohol. So just to make that clear, an ideal dose of sex with a steady partner would be like 3 times a week at least. And for alcohol, it's not more than 10 drinks a week for females, ideally 1 a day, and males not more than 14 a week or not more than 2 a day. So thanks again.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.